welcome to the No State Project here on LRN.FM, the Liberty Radio Network, and also streaming live on my YouTube channel, No State Project, coming to you live for March 24th, 2018, live from the fortified compound in Mesa, Arizona. But remember, Libertopia.org is where you can sign up for Libertopia 2018 March. I did it again. May 3rd through May 6th. In San Diego, Humphreys by the Bay. So I hope to see you out there, libertopia.org, and sign up today. I don't want anyone, look, we talk a lot about traffic tickets here on the show, of course, because that's what we do. And it's also one of the opportunities that people have to challenge the system, to step out of the comfort zone and actually take an active role in discrediting the actors who claim to be protecting life, liberty, and property, and asking effective questions using the Socratic method, keeping the burden on them and exposing them for the con men and the criminals that they are. And Whit from Gilbert once, took a shot because Chris from Kansas had called in and he was challenging a parking ticket. And, don't let anyone discourage you. Not everybody, look, this is a very, very sophisticated problem that we have of getting to a voluntary side. It's not nearly as easy as some people seem to think, that just abolish government and everything's hunky-dory, everything's good to go. No, it's not that simple. We want to abolish government. And the way we get to that point is a multifaceted thing, plan of attack that and it's nonviolent, as much as can be avoided, of course. But you have to understand that people are at different levels of comfort, and for the average person, just to realize that they've been lied to, just to find out that government doesn't even exist, it's just men and women forcing us to pay them. Just getting over that hurdle is very, very difficult for a lot of people. So then to piss on somebody's baby steps to challenging that system, hopefully that did not discourage anybody from taking the baby steps and taking the steps necessary, start getting more active and exposing these people for what they are. So, to me, it's just mean-spirited. You don't need to do that. If you've got a better way to do things, hey, great. But to think that there's one way to do it, and only one way to get to a voluntary society, yeah, that's not that. No. There's civil disobedience, of course, absolutely. But you have to also get people on your side. People have to understand and know what they're dealing with. And that's a tough pill to swallow, especially if you've got family that died in the, because of military, bombings and whatnot in World War II and Korea. It's a very, very difficult pill to swallow and realize you've been lied to your whole life. And so I understand the problem that people, hey, I was alone. Internet was just, it was the mid-90s, and to realize that there was no state, there was no government, and everyone thinking you're crazy, all these patriot types thinking you're crazy. So no, the Constitution is part of the problem. It hasn't been corrupted. It's doing exactly what they designed it to do. Slave owners designed it for a system of slavery. They all own, for them, it was okay to own people as property. And too many people today still look at people as property. That meme or that idea still has not been killed. People are not property. Sorry to break it to ANCAPs, but I just don't see people as property. I think that's repugnant, repulsive. Not everything is a property. Well, everything just boils down to property right. No, it really doesn't, because people are not property. So hopefully, in my lifetime, I'd like to see that would be put to rest, that people are not property. So the problems that comes into. I want to address two here, because this came out recently with Bow in Texas because of the monster Cheryl Hardy and her accomplice, Dr. William Barry Norman, with the forced psychological evaluations. So I had a good friend that I spoke to today, unfortunately spent the night in jail, in a county jail this week. And from what he was reported to him by the people that he had to be there with, the same line that they used on Bao, who testified on the show, reported on the show that when he had medical issues that needed to be attended to, all they would do is say, "You're in jail. You're in jail." Oh, I forgot. Oh, you're right. Let me just suffer in silence. So up in Minnesota, a friend of mine got the same line. He's hearing the same lines. Other people saying they ignore you routinely just by saying you're in jail. Wow. That's some hardcore antisocial behavior there, right? I mean, a callous disregard for others. You're in jail. So maybe these people are under the impression that everybody that is in jail is so violent and has such violent tendencies, just like the cops in Sacramento, which I'll talk about in a moment, that they had to be separated from society. And the thing is, Bao was in there for a forced psychological evaluation. Peaceful guy. Not accused of any violence at all. But when you go through those doors as a prisoner, the people that work there cannot view you any lower than they already do. That's what people have died in jail because they're not given medical attention. In one of these private prisons out here in Arizona, all they do is just they get fined every month. $100,000. They still don't change. They still don't give people medical attention. Oh, because you're in jail. And that is probably why, when you look at what happened, that yet another unarmed black man was gunned down. I think there were 20 bullets shot at Stephen Clark Sunday night. And it was actually recorded by the body cams. Maybe that's why they plant evidence when they do things like that. Maybe that's why they frame people, why they test a lie, why cops cannot stop lying. Because they know damn well what is waiting for them in jail. Because if they have any kind of medical issue, you're in jail, dude. Suck it up. You're in jail. Oh, the little snowflake. Oh my gosh, the snowflake. Get over yourself. You're in jail. They know what awaits them. Even if they're not in the general pop. Because they know that they could be treated just as inhumanely as they treat us. Why would they want to go to jail for that? They know once you go through those doors, you cease to be human. You cease to have any value. You cease to have any relevance. And that is, ironically, what we are trying to do to them. Not by putting them necessarily in jail, but making them completely irrelevant. Yeah, another fatal shooting of an unarmed black man. He had a cell phone. So maybe, what's interesting is if you're black, and there's your chances are you're going to wind up dead. But here you've got a white mass killer in Parkland, Florida, and he walks out alive. Maybe what they need to do to get cops to go into these places to say that there's a black man in there with a cell phone, and then they can go in with guns blazing. But another disgraceful, show me your hands. One of the officers yelled, gun, gun, gun. And then they opened fire on a guy. I can't even imagine having someone that I know shot right in front of me. And just, wow. And so his grandmother, he was in his grandmother's yard just in Sacramento last Sunday. She saw the whole thing, apparently. And how do you come back from that? How do you come back from that? And they'll probably do the usual thing. They'll blame him. Well, he should have just done what the cop said. The guy had a cell phone in his hand. I'm so sick of hearing this. And this is because you have a system that is criminal. It's not that they're there to protect you. People who are there to protect you do not have a prison system to ensure that you accept their services and pay for them and then take your stuff and put you in those prisons if you don't. That's not how normal people operate. That's how criminals operate. And I wrote a whole book called Government Indicted about this and the psychological implications of having such a hierarchy over people, giving people the ability to violently dominate other people with no responsibility. What the hell do you expect to have? That is government. Men and women forcing us to pay them, and then to stay in place, they have to have men with guns and a prison system to ensure that you continue giving your compliance. The services are that's a distraction. The services are just part of the public relations, the things that they have to do to maintain some legitimacy. Get it? Which is why they can't prove their laws apply. Which is why the only thing that they can do when you challenge them on this is to say, we got a prison system, jackass. You don't think there's evidence? Go ahead and ask again. In fact, why don't you ask me within arm's length and I'll show you the evidence. This is the mentality of these people. They are criminals. And then they've got people on the internet who will crap all over your work and flood your page to distract. They can distract from that. This is the level of discourse that you have with people like that. They are violent, and the people who support them support the violence. Because why else would someone claim, stand within arm's length of me? Yeah, but if all you have is violence, I got news for you. You're a crook and you're a thug. You have no actual evidence. But there are those of us who want to be ethically consistent. We want to be morally consistent, even if we're just doing something as minor as challenging a parking ticket. Because it is being more morally consistent, and if you can't see the value in that, then I don't know what to tell you. Standing up for yourself against bullies always has moral value. It may not always be the smart thing to do in the moment, but it always has moral value. And to crap on it, just to make yourself feel better, well, I don't do it. Well, all right, fine. We're not having earth-shattering things here, but there is an influence on individual lives. And so we don't get here, I don't get here in the show, and that my whole claim to fame is, I've got the largest podcast in the world. No, because we actually help people. The show is just a vehicle to get the message out and help other people. It's not an end unto itself so I can brag about how many subs I have. It's how many people we're able to help. It's actually helping people. And you can see the success story page on markstevens.net that has just a fraction of the people that we've been able to help. The interesting thing here is that there was a camera from a helicopter, because the cops came out also with a helicopter. Wow. So I don't have all the facts on here. It just, at some point, the man turned and advanced towards the office. He's coming right for us! Where have we heard that before? He turned and advanced toward the officers while holding an object extended out in front of him, according to police. According to the police, who routinely make things up. Well, there is body cam footage, so if that's available, then we'll see if that corroborates their story. The officers believe the suspect was pointing a firearm at them. Fearing for their safety, the officers fired their duty weapons, striking the suspect multiple times. The body camera footage is dark and shaky. The helicopter pivots, blocking the aerial view of Clark and the two police officers in the brief seconds leading up. Oh, yeah. The officers fired 20 times at Clark, and he was hit multiple times. Officers then handcuffed Clark and began life-saving efforts. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Yeah, I know somebody was reporting to you last night that they're receiving death threats. Yeah, you killed an unarmed guy with a cell phone. How many times do we have to hear that story play out? Just sickening. Just sickening. Yeah, the mayor, I feel the community's anguish. Yeah, sure you do. Excuse me for not accepting that, taking that at face value. It's vital that we give voice to the pain in our community, especially the African American community. Really? Really? Seriously? Have you been to your jails where somebody with a serious infection just gets, you're in jail? Give me a break. If you felt the community pain, here's the thing. Why don't you stop forcing the community to pay you? How about that? How about, right? Doesn't that make sense? If you actually feel anything for the community and the people that you are supposedly serving, here's the thing. If you actually care about people, you don't force them to give you money. Right? Sounds reasonable to me. That's what we want. We already have a no state world because states don't exist. We would just like people, the majority of people, or at least enough to understand that that's the way things are. That there is no government, there is no state, there are no citizens. It's just a system of control. And yeah, they provide services. No one's saying that they don't. And no one's saying that these services aren't necessarily services that people are willing to pay for voluntarily. Of course we want the services, a lot of the services. We want roads, we want, electricity and sanitation, things like that. We just don't want it to be done and provided by a criminal organization. We don't want it being done by a bunch of people with narcissistic, antisocial personalities that when someone has an infection, you don't show some concern. Abafongo, you're in jail. You're in jail. Ay. I mean, that's what you would expect from being in prison in Turkey. It's like Midnight Express all over again, like everyone's in there on violent drug charges. I mean, give me a break. We will get to the calls now. We have Andy in Palm Springs with an update. Andy, welcome back to the show.
Hey, good afternoon, guys. So I did I tell you that I got my demurrer mailed back to me from the clerk of the court?
I don't remember that.
Yeah, well, I sent you an email earlier, and you're probably like crazy busy. I totally understand. So I followed up on that, and I called down there, and they, to the extent possible, were trying to help and whatnot. I finally got to some kind of supervisor named James, and he had no frame of reference for it other than, well, maybe it got sent to like the family. Usually those things are sent to like the family care facilities. Maybe if that's where it got sent. If you don't hear from me by Friday, send them again Monday. And thank God I sent it return receipt requested, because I was able to give him chapter and verse of who signed for it, what time, blah, blah, blah. So once again, incompetency reigns. And so just to be safe, they got this thing all set up. So it's like a business, obviously. So you can postpone up to 60 days, 30 days twice on the internet. And since I found out on the day in question, the 21st, that there was no need for me to show purportedly. Do I need to go on the web and extend it? Oh, it probably would be a good idea. So that's what I did. But we'll see what happens, obviously. So that's the update. And I need to get on Skype and do some role playing. And I'm on Skype already, so hopefully we can get that done after the broadcast today,
Well, sure, and I appreciate all the work the guys do. I'll do my best to actually join, so someone send me a message about that. I'll try to do that after the show. I might have some time after the show to do that. So maybe we'll actually, after the show's over, maybe we'll actually Skype and I'll broadcast on this. Maybe we'll do, if I'm able to, we can do a role-playing session live here we'll do the live stream. So we'll give that a shot.
Right.
And for those who want to join that, it is Frank Rizzo 3.
Right. It was a little confusing for me early on, but I finally, like last week or whatever, was able to get it worked out. Regarding all this, the body cameras were on mute and stuff like that with the Sacramento thing. How come nobody's thought of they got all this cloud stuff. Why don't we make some kind of directive to where these people have to send everything live to the cloud and they don't have any control over it? And that way we can see what really happens. That's a tragedy to the nth degree. Yet again, black person, subhuman. Let's just, shoot him and figure out our reasons later, you know?
Well, you know, there are some people that would say it's just science. They're not really at the level. Science proves that they're not as evolved because they're unlike white Europeans who had to survive a winter. Science, dude, it's just science. Black people from Africa are just not as, they're better at running, but they're just not, the science shows that they're intellectually inferior. They didn't have to evolve with the same, I mean, you know, I'm not saying that necessarily pervades this, but it seems to be like the there's a very small percentage that really gets upset when unarmed people are gunned down like that. If that was a white European descent that had a lot of money, I mean, imagine they shot down like that George Clooney, or they shot down Brad Pitt. Can you imagine the uproar people would have with a white European rich man being shot down because he had a cell phone in his hand? You really think the cops could spin that if they killed Brad Pitt under the same conditions? Or any other, you know, well-known white rich guy? No. No. There's a reason why black men almost never walk away from the cops under these circumstances. And a white Christian man can walk in and blow up a church and they walk out. I know it's going to send you alt-right or some of these ANCAPs with their having their heads explode. Well, Mark, science does. Oh, that fungal science. I'm tired. Something has to give here. Something has to change. It's not a matter of training the police officers different. Let me tell you something. I was trained in combat. Most of us that were in the Army or the Marines were trained in combat. I used to do recon and when we were, and I would be a point man. Everyone had to play the point man. That was part of the training.
Right.
We knew, and through the training, that it was in the war games that you knew you were going into a situation where you could be ambushed. And one of the first things that we were taught to do, if you come under fire, is to drop. Why? Because it makes you less of a target. How many times have you heard in the Army and the Marines being trained that you just open fire if you're under attack? You just open fire where you're standing. What kind of an idiot just starts opening fire without trying to protect themselves? If he really has a gun, get your ass down. You know, this is upsetting to anybody with any kind of moral compass, because how many times, Andy, do we have to hear these stories? If it's not a school being shot up, it's an unarmed black man or someone else who's not lily white European being gunned down. That's not to say that lily white Europeans don't get shot, but not at the same. I can't. Unless it's such a biased media that they're disproportionately reporting on when they're black.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what to say other than Abraham Lincoln was right in theory, but not all people are created equally. Period. Paragraph. You know, these 5-year-olds with guns are just an example of it.
Yeah, well, it's the nature of the system.
Don't get the benefit of the doubt, you know, if you're black, period. You
right.
Don't get the benefit of the doubt.
Right. But my point, there's a number of points here, is if at least in my experience and with my training, knowing I'm going into a dangerous situation, I don't stand there with an M16 or my M60. I don't just stand there and open fire. What do they actually teach the cop to stay in your position and open fire? You don't seek cover? You're in a backyard. Seek cover. Get your ass to the ground. And if you're under attack, then you can fire from a safer position. To just stand there and open fire? Fungal, come on, that has no business in any kind of combat type training. And I'm not saying I was an infantry expert, but come on, everybody. Welcome back to the No Snake Project, live from the fortified compound in Mesa, Arizona. And, you know, it's a contentious thing. You know, I don't know if that's the right issue, but it is certainly going to bother anybody with a conscience. And I don't expect cops and bureaucrats to have that, because that's why they're bureaucrats. If they had anything before they started the job, when they did seek out a position of violent domination and no responsibility over other people, then they lost that. And you actually have to, if you're normal and you have empathy, yes, it's going to bother you. And this is not an aberration. This is not, oh my gosh, this is so awkward. This happens all the time. And I know somebody's wrote on there that I know pasty white Europeans are also shot by the cops. I understand. How many of them are unarmed? I mean, they even did a video where, and I know it's just one anecdotal situation, where a white guy walking down the street of a major city with an AR-15. And the cops may question him, but they don't arrest him and almost kill him. They do this. I think they then pass the gun off to a guy who was black, and they lost their minds, calling backup and whatnot. So and if you're one of these, dude, it's science. Science says that blacks are intellectually inferior. Then please don't bother me with that crap. I am not interested in that. What I want to see is that a system, and I'll bring Andy back, is where they're getting rid of a system that is criminal in nature, that creates animals like these two cops up in Sacramento, where you cannot expect anything less. It's in Government Indicted. I have all the psychological stuff outlining that the only thing you can expect when you do that is what happened in Sacramento, is the abuse. Because you give somebody a gun and tell them to go out and dominate other people, take control and give orders, and you're not responsible to your victims, and we will back you up. We will, okay? And just like Trevor, who in Oregon, who's called, they're closing ranks. They're not going to give him any of the Brady information, just like they do in California. They're not going to say whether the cop has been caught lying before. They will not get into and allow us to get into the file. It's disgraceful. If they're lying, we should know about it. Don't you agree, Andy?
100%. I'm a little new to that issue. What were the circumstances? Why were the cops called to that guy's backyard in the first place? Or is that all up to conjecture? Of course, it'll be a spin.
Well, I only have one headline here. So I don't know. I don't know why they were called. I'll have to look at another article regarding that, because I don't have the details in this particular article that I looked up.
Right.
It may have. I think maybe there was a report of theft or something. I don't know. I should have researched this better than I have. No. They were responding to a call about a suspect who had broken into several cars and was hiding in a backyard. Okay, so why there was a helicopter out there for car theft, that sounds like overkill to me. But would have been nice if the helicopter had actually gotten footage that may or may not confirm the police officer's story. But this is a common thing. We had, Diallo, I think his name was, and I'm mispronouncing that. He was, I think, a Haitian immigrant in New York. This is going back 15, 18 years, easy, because I wrote about it in Government Indicted. The cops asked him to identify himself. He reached into his back pocket to get his wallet, and they opened fire and hit him, I think it was 19 times. Again, how many rich white people getting their wallet out are shot by police officers? How many? Someone go and do the research, and maybe we'll get that posted and I can talk about it. How many people who are millionaires, who are asked to identify themselves to police officers, that when they go to get their wallet are gunned down? I love to see.
Can't count them on one hand. That's for sure.
Right, and like I wrote in Government Indicted, how many drug raids are done on the homes in Irvine, California? How many are done in Beverly Hills? We know damn well they're using drugs. We know full well their kids are no different than any other kids. They're smoking pot. Okay, where are the drug raids in Beverly Hills? Pot's illegal. Where are the drug raids?
Ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, it doesn't. They do not go. That cop, and this is not just because he's rich, but because he's part of a privileged class like the rich. And the cop in Minnesota was able to turn himself in 8 months after the fact. How many people get to turn themselves in for murder? You know, it's just like the
unbelievable.
It was like the affluenza defense that somebody used, where he drunk driver, a kid killed them, and the judge gave him no time. He wouldn't do well in prison. Is that so maybe I should get into the legal defense for murderers and rapists. Your Honor, my client is guilty as hell. This son of a bastard is guilty. But you have to give him a break because he's not going to do well in prison. He just won't. Fungal. It's the system we've been talking about that's the problem. And there are serious, undisputable psychological implications that happen when people are given control of other people. And this isn't me talking. This is more hardcore science and observable science, and this garbage that blacks and Africans didn't evolve intellectually as much as white Europeans because of winter, dude. Science, dude. Okay? You put other people in charge. You have a violent hierarchy, and then you take responsibility away. How many Stanford prison experiments do you need to be able to prove that the things that happen, the horrible things that happen because you do that? And we see it played out every day. They don't have to just kill the victims, but just putting them in jail and abusing them. What's a common thing that cops like to say? Hey, you might beat the rap, but you're not going to beat the ride. As long as they get to punish you for your insolence because you didn't respect their authority, they don't give a damn if you're convicted or not, as long as they get to personally punish you. You've heard that before, right? That you could beat the rap and not the ride.
Yep, and it's think of what's behind that. You know, that's a pretty telling statement in terms of lack of empathy, just general do unto others. You know, and what happened to innocent until proven guilty? You know.
Well, I'll put this out. I'll put this out. The guilty until proven, the innocent until proven guilty is for the courts. It's not. It's for the judicial branch and the jury. It's not for the prosecution and the police. The police are not supposed to presume you're innocent because they wouldn't take you in. But they're supposed to have evidence, and that's where it's usually sorely lacking. And the thing, too, is just because you're accused of a crime does not make you a subhuman animal or a sub-animal, whether you could be treated inhumanely. They're supposed to hold you so that they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So while you're being held, you shouldn't be treated like, you shouldn't be treated like crap. If you've got a medical issue, you're in their care. For people who are new, when you're out on the street, the cops have absolutely no duty whatsoever. Moral, ethical, nothing. They have no duty to protect you, period. But that is different when they force you into their custody. Now there's a special relationship that even the animals, these narcissistic, robe-wearing pieces of filth in the courts, where even they agree. Now you have a special relationship, and now you have a legal as well as a moral duty to their well-being. But they don't.
Well, you know, kind of like I was thinking through, and I remember reading a long time ago, Lenny Bruce had a book called How to Talk Dirty and Influence People. And one of the things that stuck with me was the only crime in America is being poor. And it kind of comes down to that, too, especially when you're talking to the black people or the minorities, you know?
Yeah, there's definitely, I see it more as a class issue as far as being poor, as opposed to just because that's a straightforward and general racism issue. They're going to go after the people who don't have money and can't hire the lawyers. And we've had whistleblowers very recently, former cops that had to leave the force that said, yes, they are to go after the disproportionately poor, or the poor people, because they can't afford a defense. And if you're in a place like Baltimore, what percentage of the poor are black as opposed to white? So they're going to be targeting black, not because they're necessarily black, but because they're poor and can't afford a defense. And we know that the cops out in Maryland were some anyway, have already been proven. And all right, we're up against the break. They're not the only ones. They're the ones that get caught. And I just make light. I don't mean nobody offended me by saying I was Italian. I just it's a family. It's an inside joke when I say I'm not Italian. I'm Sicilian. There are differences though. Anyway. Yeah, my family is from Carini, Sicily. So if anybody's family's from there, paisan. You get a little worked up when you see these things because you have empathy. We can't help but get a little upset over that, and it's such an enormous problem. Will anarchy solve these problems? A lot of them, yeah. Yes, because the principle of do no harm applies to everybody. And the idea that you can get away with shooting somebody with a cell phone just because you said you feared for your life and have no repercussions at all? It's in a voluntary society, in an anarchist society. There's responsibility. You don't have this mythology that the principle of right and wrong, basic principles of right and wrong, live honestly, injure nobody, give every man his due, that magically doesn't apply because you force people to pay you, and you call yourself a government. You don't need a prison system in order to have roads. You don't need a prison system to have a sanitation services or water or electricity. You don't need to do that. It is not a necessary evil. You're erecting a bureaucracy and a structure of society that is going to lead to such horrible abuses. If you have a system that sets one group against the other, us and them, to where the police, as an example, see everything as a threat, you're going to continue getting these things. So if you believe in right and wrong, not legal and illegal, because that's a freaking perversion, right and wrong, regardless of the actor involved, then you have to be an anarchist. You cannot support what is called a government, because as I wrote in Government Indicted, which, again, markstevens.net, it's contradictory. The way they act is contradictory to what they say they're supposed to do. They're supposed to be protecting life, liberty, and property, but they're the first and worst of violators of life, liberty, and property. The means conflicts with the end. And no one is able to provide any explanation or contrary facts. Why shouldn't we have a government there, Mark? Because the ends conflict with the means. You see? That's simple. That's why we have to baby step with people. I'm a skeptic. You have to see, and something you have to experience it for yourself. So go in and challenge a parking ticket and watch the attitude of these people. With just a parking ticket, $8, if they are willing to lie over and be completely unfair to you for $8. Imagine the depth of the depravity when they want to get $1,000 out of you. So, yeah, if you're a skeptic, great. Paisan, we're the same, get a parking ticket. Or just go to a city council meeting and start asking some questions. And you'll experience firsthand. And then you'll be able to say, yeah, I now have evidence consistent with what you've presented on your little show there, Mark. Anyway, we got area code. He's been on the big broadcast before. We got an update, I think, from Carl. Coral! What's
going on, Mark?
How you doing, Coral? I've made it all these years without doing that cheesy Walking Dead imitation.
Oh, that's big shit.
Oh, man.
Oh, man.
All right, everybody. Flame away.
I had a very interesting ride through Legal Land on Thursday. Had myself a little bit of a motion hearing
Okay.
that turned out to be pretty much a freaking circus. I literally had a judge completely refuse to answer certain questions, told me complete bullshit, which we knew, but it was interesting stuff that he did. Like when I asked if this court was bound by Supreme Court rulings, he didn't answer. There was nothing but crickets in the background for about 30 seconds. I asked it again. He says, I'm not going to answer that.
You see what you did there,
already...
Coral. You made one, like the cardinal. You violated one of the cardinal rules of sales, and okay, the first one who speaks after you ask the question, when you're okay, the first one who speaks loses. I know it's uncomfortable, but just sit there, wait for your answer.
Right.
But anyway. So, okay, so you ask him again.
Yeah, and he said, I'm not going to answer that. And since I'd already asked some foundational questions, such as, do I have a right to a fair and meaningful hearing here today? And he said yes at that point. When he said, I'm not going to answer that one, I said, well, earlier you said I had the right to a fair and meaningful hearing. And it seems that I've lost that. I'm kind of wondering where along the way that happened.
Wow.
He just looked at me like, you're a piece of shit. And I just smiled at him like, yes, I am.
Well, Carl, I'm not going to happen to doing that. Maybe something else you could have said was, and again, for those new, we ask leading questions. And so a good leading question there would be, oh, how can I possibly defend myself against something that you're not disclosing?
Right.
See, the whole thing of being informed is so that you can have an opportunity to defend. And how can you possibly defend yourself in a situation where they're not disclosing to you such very important things, such as what rules actually govern the court? So it's like going in and getting into a football game and saying to the people, do the basic rules of American football apply?
Nope, not here.
And they just sit back and they don't. I'm not going to answer that question. I'm not going to.
Yeah. One of the best ones. One of the best ones is when I asked, "Well, is jurisdiction an element of the cause of action?" He said, "No."
Wow.
I said, really? Since when? He says, "I'm not going to answer that."
Oh, okay, that's different. Wow.
I got that one a lot. Whenever I'd ask the cop a question, I'd hear, objection sustained. On what grounds? Because I said so. Next, move on.
Oh, you were at a trial. Oh, I thought you were at a motion hearing.
Yeah, it was an motion hearing. I was just getting railroaded. It was funny as hell.
So the cop. Wait. Okay, but Carl, the cop was there.
Yeah.
For a motion hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, and they wouldn't even let me ask certain questions such as, well, have you read, after I asked, do you enforce the Constitution and codes? Yes. Have you read the Constitution? Objection. Sustained. On what grounds? Because I said so. So
the judge was objecting, not the witness?
Well, no, the prosecution was objecting, and the judge was just sustained most everything that they said. And overruled most everything that I
expected to do as well. I think I have to jump in here and correct you. I don't think you were at a motions hearing if the police officer was on the stand and you were at a trial.
No, it was a motions hearing.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Let's get back to Coral. All right. I'm ruining. I think I'm kind of ruining the show by now. But if anyone's not familiar with that, I guess that's kind of sad. But anyway, so you were why at a motion? All right. What kind of motion hearing was? What was the subject matter of the motion? Was it your motion to dismiss or?
Yes, it was supposed to have been, but it ultimately ended up being because there's some. My situation is a little bit different. There is an actual alleged victim, although the alleged victim has stated several times over that she's never been a victim by me, that is. She's actually told the court several times that the only victim or the only people that have ever made her a victim has been them.
Nice.
And the system.
Nice.
Yeah, she said that several times. She said, the only people that have ever damaged me is you.
Nice. Wow. Would have liked to have been there for that. Wow.
It was beautiful.
Nice. And so despite the fact that she's not going to testify against you, they still want to prosecute you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
yeah,
I'm amazed that they had the police officer there for a motions hearing.
Yeah, it was very strange. In fact, I got him to admit that he lies for investigations, but then they wouldn't let him answer any of my other questions, my follow-up questions after that.
Well, give me an example of a follow-up question.
Well, how far are you willing to take a lie to make an arrest? How far are you willing to take a lie to get a conviction? How much are you willing to lie for your investigation?
So did you get to ask him if he's lied on the stand?
No. Well, when I actually asked if he lied in court, they objected and he wouldn't answer anyway.
Well, he has to at least take the Fifth Amendment for that. He should, know.
He just kind of looked at the DA. The DA objected. The judge sustained. I asked on what grounds. He said because I said so.
See, the thing is, if he doesn't want to, look, the prosecutor has to have legitimate grounds to form, to give an objection. You can't just say objection and not give the grounds for it. You have to provide the grounds so that you have an opportunity to defend against it. And so here it's an arbitrary denial. You got to file a motion to disqualify this judge, Monday. And because the other thing, if like I mentioned, if the police officer had a legitimate concern that that the answer to the question, have you lied in court before, that could incriminate him, he can claim the Fifth Amendment, but all of his testimony has to be thrown out. All of it. You don't get to pick and choose that kind of. So that's what happens too if somebody who's a defendant is careless enough to go on the stand and try to make, and then on cross-examination, they turn around and say, I'm going to invoke my right not to incriminate myself. I'm not going to, you can't force me to testify against myself. Like, oh, that's very true. And then they'll say to the judge, motion to strike all of the defendant's testimony, period. Hey, hell, you can get admit, I'm glad that you were able to do that. I will point out to this, so people know, cops are legally able to lie through their teeth outside of court to get an admission or to make an arrest. They can lie through their teeth. The courts have always upheld, well, not always, but for decades have upheld that. The problem comes in when they lie under oath and when they're in court. That's a problem. The only other time they're lying is a problem, like to get a confession, is if the way they do it crosses the line into mental torture, where they're exerting so much stress on you that you just plead, you just make a confession because you want them to stop. But short of that, they can say whatever they want.
Oh, and the judge pretty much did, the cop pretty much did, and the DA pretty much did. I wasn't allowed to, but they pretty much said whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Mark, to me, and I do laugh at it because after having been listening to your stuff for a little over a year now and been active with the No State Project since late September, early October of last year, I've grown to learn quite a bit about how much they will cross the paint. So I went into this figuring they were just going to completely cross the paint. I didn't know how much. I didn't try to assume that they were going to either limit it to this or that or whatever. I just kind of went in thinking, okay, let's see how bad they get, and just knowing that I still have a couple of opportunities to try to shut things down. And that's what I'm working on now, is writing my writ of certiorari. And in fact, the alleged victim is going to write one as well.
Whoa, wait a minute.
It takes half. Well, because here in California, if the outcome of the trial or the decisions are made impacts a third party, they can submit one as well.
Yeah, but I think you're way, way, way ahead of the game. It's because that is basically a petition for an appeal. What you're doing is an appeal. and you haven't had a trial yet. So certiorari.
Well, no, it can be done for here in California. It can be done even prior to a trial. It can be done on any kind of a decision made prior to a trial, even.
And you can show where, and it's because I know you can do a petition for writ of mandate or a petition for writ of prohibition.
Right.
We've never actually gotten any court, any appellate division in California to ever take jurisdiction over them. So does you see it as a viable option at this time that they'll actually take jurisdiction and stop the trial court? Because I would.
The only thing that I'm hoping for at this point, at a minimum, because they're trying to push me into trial as early as Tuesday. I'm trying to at least get, based on the fact that I file, it's going to put everything on hold at least for a few days.
Well, the thing is, the higher court, unless it's by law that there's an automatic stay, you have to get the stay to stop the trial court at the appellate level where you filed a petition for the writ of certiorari.
Right. Right, exactly. In fact, California has a form. It's 151. In fact, I've been reading through there's form 150, which is all the information on it. It is one form for all three, basically, and you can actually, I guess, add a couple others from what I'm seeing right now. And it's petition for a writ of probate, or writ of mandate, or writ of certiorari.
Okay.
So that's it basically, and I haven't finished completely going through everything yet because there's some side codes and statutes and such, and I've been trying to be very thorough and reading every bit of it so I know exactly what it is I'm doing with this to be sure that when I file it, I'm as on point as possible.
Well, I hope it does stop them or you get a stay of proceedings, because what I was looking at doing is getting a motion to change the judge so that if he denies it, at least you've got very solid grounds to maintain a petition for writ of mandate. Doesn't mean that, and you could be the first one that I've worked with and known that actually got that through. We'll finish in the next segment, so just hold tight. What we're talking about is you're going to file a petition for writ of certiorari, which is, I guess, going to be kind of an interlocutory appeal to have the higher court review and maybe reverse what the trial court is doing, which is obviously making arbitrary rulings where the prosecution makes an objection and doesn't even have to articulate what that objection is. The judge sustains the objection with no explanation and tells you, I don't have to tell you.
Yep. And just so you know, too, the form that I'm filling out, if I'm reading everything correct, it can be used for disqualification of a judge and disqualification of a prosecutor as well.
Nice. Well, definitely add that in there because you certainly have grounds, and you have factual grounds. He is arbitrarily denying your motions. He's arbitrarily granting the motions from the prosecution and saying, I don't have to tell you. And I'd love to be able to say, really? So let me ask you a question. If I make an objection and I don't articulate why I'm objecting and you sustain it, and the prosecution, and they ask you for the grounds, you're going to say the same thing? Are you going to do the same thing to your buddy here who works for the state too? I highly doubt a prosecutor is going to sit there and listen to a judge saying, I don't have to tell you, sir. I know it's just I know it's just public relations. I know your sacred laws and constitution are just GD pieces of paper. I get that. But most people don't. And doesn't that say that you're supposed to provide due process? And if you're acting as if you're a court, if you're acting as if the laws mean anything, then doesn't due process require that you don't rule arbitrarily against me? Again, it comes down to this thing, everybody. You cannot defend against something that's not disclosed to you. So if the judge is going to sustain an objection that you don't even know what the objection was, and he doesn't tell you, and no one verbalizes it, you can't defend against it. So I want someone to call the show as a critic and try to tell me, give me a rational explanation as to why a judge can sustain an objection that was not articulated and not have to. Tell me a rational reason why the judge doesn't have to tell you what the objection was and why he sustained it.
Well, if you're not going to worry about violating due process, none of that matters then.
Ah, that's true. And that's the thing. They're not there to be fair. This is
if you don't see the paint lines, then what are you worried about crossing the paint lines for?
That's a good point. And that's why we said so many times on the show, they're a criminal organization, and at these levels, they don't give a damn that it doesn't look right. They just don't care. This is Cheryl Hardy and Dick Noble and Herbert Pierpan. These are the type of people who are so hardened against any kind of fairness. They're stuck in a dead-end job. You know, yeah, they're judges, they're better than prosecutors, but they're not going anywhere. They're never going to sit on the appellate bench. They're in their 60s. They're not going anywhere. They're going to retire as a traffic court judge. They don't give a damn. So they're going to take out all their anger and piss and venom at the fact that life passed them by, and they're going to take it out on us. Nice.
Yep.
So,
well, and this is part of why I was saying earlier about why I laugh, because it's these stories of Noble and Hardy and some of these others. You know, I worked with Bal. I role played with that boy right up until the night before. Actually, I was role playing with him the night before. He's up in the cage. You know, ask it a question.
So, yeah, exactly. And how many? You know, I mean, if the show was larger and we had more people to actually report in, we would have. You know, if the show is 100 times larger than it is now, we would have 100 times more reports. You know, if people actually going in and whether it happened to them or they saw it happen to somebody. Exactly. And again, this comes down to the same reason why the cops are shooting so many people. They don't care because they don't have to. They are given a gun, just like a judge is given violent domination over everyone who's forced into that building. And unlike a cop, he has absolutely no personal responsibility to his victims. Zero. Absolutely zero. So even if he goes to jail, you can't sue the judge. And you can hear the critics, oh, yes, you can if they don't have... Legally, you can hold a judge accountable civilly on some instances. But in practical terms, no. Hell no. You think the blue code of silence is strong? The black robe of silence is even stronger.
I bet. And of course, the big thing too, and this is just my own opinion from my own studies, but the one thing that really screws a judge over in terms of things that he does and can leave him liable is when he's found to be absence of all jurisdiction. And of course, the one issue that we're driving at is where's your evidence of jurisdiction? Well, if they don't have that, they're absence of that jurisdiction completely. It means that they're completely liable for everything they do.
So what I would like to see to get around this, if somebody was to file a claim against the county or the city's insurance for what the prosecutor, the cop, and the judge did, when they deny it and you have to go to court, now the judge is just a witness, right? Get this son of a... Now, look, I've done this with enough bureaucrats, okay? I've gone right to Bruce Washburn, who's the city attorney in Scottsdale, asked him to his face. And he's a nice guy. I shouldn't build it up that way. He's very professional. He's a nice guy as far as prosecutors go. And I asked him point blank, what evidence would you use against me, if any? He says, I'm not going to answer that. So I know the prosecutors and how they would probably respond. I would love the opportunity to question this judge like you're talking. Like, what evidence did the prosecutor give you to support the claim that you had personam jurisdiction over Coral? See, in a deposition or even as a witness on the stand, what is his defense not to answer that question? Because it goes directly to the claim against the city or the county for the abuse and damage that they suffered at your hands. He's just a witness. He doesn't have absolute immunity from a subpoena in the legal process. He only has absolute immunity from a personal suit against him.
Right. For things that he supposedly did on the bench with the jurisdiction. But of course, and this is where I've noticed, particularly with a lot of the documents that have been sent in to you, and there's only been one, if I remember, where the judge did say something about the DA did not provide evidence of jurisdiction. For the most part, they usually put the prosecution lacked sufficient evidence. But it seems to me that as soon as they put that wording that the prosecution lacks jurisdiction, well, that means that so did the court, the judge. And
because
if he puts that words in there, because he's relying on the people that are bringing the claim for him to have that jurisdiction. So it means that if the people bringing the claim never had it, and he puts it in writing that they never had it, and he's putting it out there in writing that he never had it either.
That's pretty nice to have, but I wanted just to finish the reason why we want to get the judge as a witness is because once we have testimony from them that the prosecution didn't give them any evidence, now we can then add the judge personally as a defendant and hold him personally liable. Now, the thing is, Coral, I don't see any sitting judge, even with hardcore evidence, being the one to break the mold and allow a civil complaint against a fellow sitting judge, because he knows his head could be on the chopping block next. We got to go. We're out of time for this segment, but all are welcome, and dissent, of course, is welcome. If what I'm presenting here on The Big Show or on markstevens.net you believe is inaccurate, I have my facts wrong, I have my logic way off, or both, you're more than welcome to call into the show and correct me. You know, there's no merit to nothing you say will change your mind, Mark. That's not true, because almost 3 years ago, I became a vegan live on the air. That I realized, and it was shown to me by Eyal of No State Project Israel, that my behavior was not ethically consistent. It was not morally consistent. And so when presented with the facts and logic, I changed. So if I'm incorrect, for anyone to say something like that, that's just, either your argument is not too persuasive or you just, I don't know, not worth getting into. But we've got more calls. I appreciate everybody's patience there. And so far, I don't want to jinx anything, but hey, this is a show and a half already more of no tech issues. So very nice. Very, very nice. So what I'm going to do, I am going to bring up, we've got Richard in California on. Richard, welcome to The Big Show.
Hi there, how's it going?
Pretty good. Do we have everyone in California? Is that been what we did for? Yeah, we had Palm Springs, Fulton, and you're in California too. So it's a whole West Coast kind of thing today. So what's going on today?
Yeah, so I'm dealing with a speeding ticket, and I had an arraignment last Friday. It didn't go too well. I didn't, do too well with the questions and whatnot. I wasn't really prepared for what happened. So I'm just calling in to get some, see what you might recommend with steps moving forward. We had the arraignment, and basically, the judge kind of handed my butt to me, and I wasn't really ready. I came in with, a motion to dismiss, and, she popped off with, this is not a hearing, by the way, I don't know if I said it was a commissioner, not a judge, and that, a motion hearing could only be scheduled by entering in a not guilty plea, and she ended up entering in a not guilty plea for me, and sets a motion hearing and a trial date.
Okay, let's go break this down. I wouldn't beat myself. You're going against someone who's an experienced liar, someone who's very good at manipulating people and misdirecting. She probably would have made. It was a woman judge or commissioner.
Yes.
Yeah, probably, I think some of these people would make decent amateur, magicians. Because she lied. The idea that, especially in California, that you have to enter a plea to get a hearing, no. Because if you're not even supposed to be able to do it, it's called the demur in California and Kentucky. Mm-hmm. Because entering a plea kind of takes away from the ability to do a demur. And so if they wanted to set the demur for a hearing, which is great, fine, then you do that, and it is completely improper, and she's lying to you that in order to file a demur and get it heard, you have to enter a plea. No, she lied. She straight up lied. And so for those listening, when you file a motion, let's just use this in the context, Richard, so that it makes more sense to critics. If you were to file a complaint against the judge, or let's say the IRS, a civil complaint, because, all right, so you got a civil complaint there. And it's a civil complaint for damages. The judge or the IRS are going to argue in a motion to dismiss that the court doesn't have, or a demur, they're going to argue that the court doesn't have jurisdiction, that you don't have sufficient facts to set forth an offense, failure to state a claim. And what that does is it relieves them from the obligation of having to file an affirmative answer, basically a plea in a civil context. And so really, to be short, she just straight up lied to you. So anyone in that situation, if a judge says you have to enter a plea to get a hearing on your motion to dismiss or your demur, they're lying to you. Straight up lying to you. And you call them on it. By a lead objection and a leading question. Objection, do you believe that that's accurate? Isn't it more accurate to say that the demur has to be determined before a plea is entered? Isn't that the way it goes? And let them lie on the record. At least they're being more explicit now, and it's something that could be reviewed. And you tell them, well, I'm going to be filing a motion to recuse you because it seems you're having a problem telling me the truth. I don't believe what you're saying is accurate, and I believe an appellate panel will agree with me. Wow, it's just like saying jurisdiction's a trial issue only, as if there's no burden of proof. Imagine if you filed against an IRS agent or a cop. You think that you could be excused from proving jurisdiction until trial?
I would have no idea. I think the thing that came up for me is that when I was going through, one of the things that she threw me off right away with is I asked, if I have a right to be informed of the cause and nature of the proceedings, and she threw right out, the ticket, and like, oh, we just read off the ticket, and then, and I realized, I'm still trying to figure out what the full meaning of that is, of the cause and nature, so I wasn't really able to respond well with it, within follow-up questions, and then she also threw out there that when asked if I had a right to a fair and meaningful hearing, she said, this is not a hearing. This is, if you want a hearing, you schedule something else. And that's what ended up leading into her scheduling a later on hearing for the motion to dismiss.
Okay, so let's break this down, because I know you're fairly new. And so this is good that we can break this stuff down. What is the actual importance of the nature and cause? This is not some magical phrase that people from, the patriot movement and the sovereigns think. All it means is that you understand, let's say, like I mentioned earlier, why is the police officer, on what grounds is the police officer charging you? And the nature has to do with the cause and the nature has to do with the type of proceeding that you're in, so that you can effectively defend yourself. So what I mentioned before with Coral was his question to be informed was, do Supreme Court precedents apply in this court? Basically, what do these rules govern these proceedings? And the judge, so that helps you understand the nature of the proceeding. That, the court. Okay, so these are some of the rules. So you need to know the rules, which is the nature. So it also goes into, well, is this an inquisitorial proceeding or is it adversarial? Because they tell you different things. So if it's adversarial, which they all say it is, you're going to find out, and you're starting to find it's not. But it's supposed to be. That's what the public relations tells us. So what it does tell me, so that you know how to defend yourself, is that there's somebody actually making a charge against you that's an adversary, and that so to be a true adversary, they have to allege and have evidence showing that you violated one of their legal rights that led directly to them being harmed or causing damage. All right? And so that's more information that you can use to defend yourself. That may be complete horse crap, but we don't know. But that has to be disclosed to you so you can defend against it. So another one is, as far as the adversary proceeding, is that the burden of proof, this goes again to everyone new listening, the burden of proof is a very important part of the nature of the proceedings. Who has the burden of proof? So we're up against the top of the hour break already. Holy crap. So we'll discuss this. And when we get back, so just hold tight. Anarchy Radio, why do we call it that? Because we don't believe in hierarchies. Logic and reason and basic empathy tell us that hierarchies and having a ruling class is bad. It maybe not for the ruling class. If you're one of the privileged few, you might see that there's certain advantages to that, especially with your bank account and the ease with your life is going. But for regular people, who don't have a vested interest, it's just wrong. It's wrong to force people to give you money. It's wrong to force people to do things. Okay? We're talking about perfect strangers. And you can say, but they provide roads. But see, the thing is, whether it is an immoral act is not what they do after the fact. This is not a moral or ethical dilemma regarding, well, is it wrong for a man to steal a loaf of bread to feed his family? There's no ethical dilemma here. You don't force strangers to give you money to then be able to provide services they may or may not want. It's that simple. Look, the principles of right and wrong apply to everyone. And I know that might seem radical to some. Maybe your hero, who is one of these high-level bureaucrats, and you can't stand to apply basic principles of right and wrong to them. Because I even saw something the other day. What someone did prior to going to office is completely irrelevant to the job that they're actually doing. Really? People are willing to overlook a serial rapist because he has an R behind his name. I'm not saying the current White House is a serial rapist. I'm just trying to make a point. What someone does in their personal life or what they did prior to being elected does count. Would something like Ken Lay, whatever he did in business prior to getting elected is completely irrelevant. Yeah, really. Yeah. Oh, what Bernie Madoff did prior to getting elected? No, completely irrelevant. Give me these are things that there's reasons to delete Facebook, believe me. But if you get a group page, you don't get a news feed. So, all right, well, let me get back. We're talking about why it's important to know the nature and cause of the charges and proceedings against us so that we can adequately and effectively defend ourselves. So what I was mentioning before, and welcome back, Richard, I was talking about the burden of proof. Yeah. So part of the nature and cause of the charge and proceedings, so if you know that the burden of proof is 100% on the prosecutor, does that help you, at least initially? Does that tell you, how you can effectively defend yourself? Does it give you some indication of how?
Well, yeah, if I can understand, that'll help me understand if they're giving a responsive answer when I ask the question.
Yes, but also that if you know that the burden of proof is on them, you know that they have to prove it. And also that you know that their burden of proof, and this is the nature and cause of the charges and proceedings, is that the prosecutor's burden is beyond a reasonable doubt, as opposed to a civil proceeding where it's by a preponderance of evidence. And then you also know, that the rules of evidence, do the principles of or do the technical rules of evidence apply, or do they not? These help form the basis of your defense. So if we know that the burden of proof is 100% on the prosecutor, then we know that at least a good part of our defense is going to be, in general, holding the prosecution to the burden and see if they can meet that. Now, if you don't know that, it's a lot more difficult to defend yourself. And that's why it's so important to understand the nature and cause of the charges and proceedings.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me wonder then, what is the difference between a preponderance of evidence and beyond a reasonable doubt?
Well, a preponderance of evidence is where they're going to be weighing the evidence from both sides. So if the prosecution the plaintiff is presenting evidence that you did X, and you present less evidence that you did X, then they have to say you did X, because there's more evidence to show that you did as opposed to evidence that you didn't. And so that's how that works.
Got it.
Beyond a reasonable doubt is a much higher standard. because you're not required to do anything. The prosecutor is required to put all the evidence on the table that would prove beyond a reasonable doubt, not any doubt, but beyond a reasonable doubt, that you did what they said. And that's where I believe they really lose it, because look, this is probably a code violation, and that's what we deal with most here. It's almost all code violations, really. They have to prove, look, they're alleging that you are subject to their laws and that you violated them. And they have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. But how do they prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the laws apply to you when they're saying the prosecution doesn't even have to prove that? So how do you defend against it? How do you possibly prove something beyond a reasonable doubt if you don't have to prove it in the first place? Doesn't that seem like a contradiction?
Yeah, it's only just getting a free pass on the job, just kind of like, go on, go ahead.
Yeah. And part of the nature and cause of the charge and proceedings, the rules that apply to these proceedings, are that the prosecutor may not argue against you or make any claims against you that are not based on law and fact. He has to have facts to back that up. Another part of that is Rule 602. It's a little different in California. I don't call it 602, but it is part of the rules of evidence, that the witness has to have personal knowledge. And so knowing that the witness against you, that they have their personal knowledge of the matters they're testifying to, doesn't it help you in your defense? Doesn't that make it so that you can actually defend yourself a little better?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to follow. It's like I don't know if I follow you.
Okay, well,
what you're saying.
Okay, so to be a witness, the word itself is that you've actually seen something yourself. It's not a matter of, like, when we saw let's say the cop kill Eric Garner. We're not eyewitnesses to that. We weren't there when it happened. We just saw it on video. So we have a different perspective as opposed to the people who were actually there. To be a witness against you, this police officer who's making the allegations against you, fairness and reason dictate, and this is part of their rules, he has to have personal knowledge of the matters he's testifying to. And those matters are, you were in California, the laws apply to you, and I saw you violate them, right? Isn't that what he's claiming against you?
Yes.
So the rules and fairness dictate he has to have personal knowledge of that. Well, the prosecution has to disclose under Brady versus Maryland. It's a Supreme Court ruling. It's the same in Canada, Australia, and England, that the prosecution has to give you exculpatory evidence or information. Exculpatory means it shows that you're innocent, and that is really critical. The prosecution, and look, if you were to sue the prosecutor, you would be expected to have, if you're going to call witnesses, you're expected to have witnesses that have personal knowledge, not just someone telling a story, right?
Yeah.
It's a matter of being fair. And so we're supposed to be given this information so that we can defend ourselves, so it can be fair. Because it wouldn't be fair if they did not disclose these things to you, because you don't know what is being brought against you. You don't know what the rules are. So you can't really defend yourself. Could you?
Pretty much, no. I wouldn't be able to, but I understand that.
That's all right. So we'll finish in the next segment. One of the things that really ticks off statists and their apologists, the idea that we have to be informed, because notice an opportunity to defend is what it comes down to. Yeah, you can't defend against that which is not disclosed. My man, Chris Case, playing with Double Gucci, Carl Wagner, the other guitar player. He's got to be fantastic. So if you're down in Key West and on Duval Street, definitely do what you can to check out Caffeine Coral, and also Chris Case, who is the one that was nice enough to send me. I like these guys. They got extra guitars, so they So if but he's the one that was nice enough to provide me with that wonderful instrument. Which at Libertopia, if you go, I will have that there. And with Barnwell Swift, we're hoping to get a jam going. So, and we're going to do what we can to get another jam going in Oceanside, California, down there, right off the water. So now the wet is, so yeah, we have to do that again. So someone mentioned here that they were born in Buffalo. I was actually born in Cheektowaga. So I am glad that my parents moved to Long Island. I was not there for 78. I was a little kid, but I even still would not have wanted to be in Buffalo in 1978. That was bad. So anyway, we want to get back. We're talking with Richard in California. And now, Richard, you were asking me, you want to discuss what we need to do from this point forward, right?
Right.
So this is your first time defending yourself in court?
It is, yeah.
Little intimidating?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just because it's so new to me, it's hard to be flexible and ready to, go with whatever they throw at me.
All right. Are you familiar with the Socratic method and how we ask leading questions here?
Yeah. I mean, I've followed you for a bit now. I used to listen to your show a lot more, actually, more like 10 years ago.
Wow.
And so, I've heard you and I read your first book, but I'm not familiar on a level where I'm used to doing it myself. And that's a whole nother level.
So I know you're on Skype. So what you want to do guys, I can't figure this out. I cannot add anyone. You got a call going. I can't add anybody. So at least briefly, so after the show, I can put some people in, end the call. And again, I will do what I can to get into a call after the show. Show starts earlier for me now that you guys all, well, not you. Well, yeah, you're in California. You changed time also a couple of weeks ago. So anyway, what do we do from there? So we're asking, look, we know that the burden of proof is on the prosecution, so we want to hold them to it. And you already filed the demur, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can get a hearing on the demur. And the demur, which you want to be able to, hold the prosecution to, is that they have not presented sufficient facts to set forth an actual violation. Now, a violation is a code violation. So they have to have facts that the code actually applies. Facts, not just an allegation. They have to have actual facts. So that's why section, I think it's section 1001 of the criminal code in California gives you the basis of what you need to prevail on a demur. And so if they don't have they don't have sufficient facts, they may say, and they like to argue, but the code says the complaint is sufficient because it gives you reasonable understanding of the charge that you're accused. You're making an allegation, but there's not sufficient evidence here. You still have a legal standard here, according to your own rules. You have to have sufficient facts. The complaint doesn't do that. I know what you're charging me with. I get that. But you're not presenting sufficient facts to set forth an actual violation. Just saying I violated the code is not sufficient facts. So what we do in the role playing, which I recommend, I have a script available for that also, is all geared towards holding the prosecution to their burden of proof. It's not taking, and so one of the things you wanted to keep in mind, everything the judge and the prosecutor and cop are saying, just take to be a lie. Assume it's a lie and formulate in your mind a good leading question. Now, you remember what a leading question is?
Yes, it's a question that has an answer in it.
Yes. So the information you're trying to elicit from them or confirm is in the actual question. So after you pulled me over, did you wind up beating me about the head with your... That's a leading question. It's just yes or no. And that's why years ago, it was easier to do a script and keep people on point if it was just yes or no, because now you know if you've been responsive. So not only are you assuming that everything they're saying is a lie, you have to make sure that you're getting a responsive answer to your question. And 99% of the time, you're going to get a non-responsive answer. And that's just to misdirect you so that you will not continue asking a question regarding something they don't have, let's say like evidence proving jurisdiction. So you would object, say, objection, please answer the unanswered, objection non-responsive.
Unresponsive.
And you're going to get that a lot. You got to get used to it. And then, so this is with the role playing where somebody should be playing, like you're the defendant, two other people should be playing the prosecutor and the judge, or the cop and the cop, so that you can now also learn how to field objections. And most of the time the objection, just like you heard from Carl earlier, is they're not even articulated, meaning they're not being specific. They're just saying objection. But you have to say why. So most of the time from the prosecutor, they're going to be objecting on relevance if they say anything. And of course, you're going to have to show that the question you're asking is relevant. And that's easy to do if you follow the script, because we're always building towards a certain, there's a certain goal. So if our goal is to show that the prosecution's witness has no personal knowledge that the Constitution applies, we have to build our relevance first. So the relevance is built by asking him, did you determine on your own, sir, that just because I was physically in California that your laws applied? And he says yes. Now, we know that that's a relevant question because that's exactly what he did, and he probably already testified to that. But that's going to set the relevance for our next questions. So did you have proof that just because I'm physically in California, your laws apply to me? Which then, when you ask, so do you have evidence? So what evidence do you rely on to prove that just because I'm physically in California, your Constitution applies to me? And that's when the prosecution is going to object. And they're probably going to say that it calls for a legal conclusion. The witness can't answer the question. Now, does that sound right to you?
It sounds like a good place to get to. If it's getting to disqualify, the witness or the testimony.
Now, but do you think that the prosecution thinks he's disqualifying his own witness?
Mm.
You see, this is what we call on the big show the douche move, because he doesn't want his witness declared incompetent. He wants you to not be able to ask him a question that destroys his case. So it's just like in Liar, Liar, Your Honor, I object. And he says, why is that? Because it's devastating to my case. And that's why he's doing it. But you're absolutely right, because he is discrediting his own witness. He just doesn't want to say that in explicit terms, because that means he put a witness on the stand who wasn't qualified. It also shows that the prosecutor lied, or that his objection has no merit because he didn't object when you asked him to confirm his legal conclusion. And all the police officer's statements and legal conclusions made before the trial are relevant on a cross-examination. Even if he didn't say it at the trial, he said it at the stop or wrote it out at the stop. So we're talking with Richard in California. He's new to this. This is his first time defending against one of these things. So doing what we can. That's what we like to do here on the show, is to actually help people. And so get Richard prepared. So we have not only the broadcast, and I do consultations, and we have paperwork, templates available, but we have the No State Project Skype chat. And yes, I do appreciate the work that you guys do in there, and hope that more people will be joining us for that. So what questions or concerns do you have? And what do we, that you're not familiar enough with, or you think you need to work on in order to better defend yourself?
Well, I think that one of the things that kind of itches in my mind, even when I'm role playing, is I'm wondering, do we just, am I supposed to just keep seeking clarifications until the judge or, throws out the case, or a prosecutor throws out the case, or am I supposed to be getting to a point where things have built up enough where then I motion, or is it any one of those, whichever opportunity comes up first? Where's the end? Because I'm not trying to be there forever either. Didn't want to be in the first place, but how am I getting toward a conclusion?
Well, you don't want to you don't want to push clarification on the same issue more than the one time, and it depends on the issue too. But look, if you can't use reason and a good leading question to get them to do the right thing the first time, you're not going to accomplish anything by repeating yourself. And from what I heard, one of the things that they like to use to justify the psychological exams is if you ask the same question a bunch of times. Now, no rational person thinks that if you ask the same question a few times that you're actually crazy and you need to be locked up. Those people need to be locked up. But from our perspective, as far as this is damage control. We're not going to spend the entire day. You make your point, you make your objection, and you have to move on. You could probably use that against them anyway later to make it more difficult, because you may have to appeal it, and that sucks. But you want to be able to have a number of very serious due process or fairness issues that can get this thing thrown out, and so that your appeal is as minimal as you can make it. So one of the things you can use against them, where you're not going to just keep going for clarification and objecting, because when they go to put the witness on the stand and you objection, the witness, there's no evidence, we have a Brady violation, there's no evidence that the witness has personal first-hand knowledge of the matters they're testifying to. They're going to say, "Abba Fongo," and they're going to put them on the stand anyway. So you can use that against them later, based, it's just, on the example I was using before the break. Okay, so the prosecutor will fight tooth and nail if they need to, and say that the witness is qualified and does have personal knowledge of what he's testifying to. Well, he's testifying that you violated the law, which means he has to have personal knowledge of that. Only an idiot would turn around and try to persuade you otherwise, because it's just not true. So if he's testifying the laws apply to you and you violate it, he has to have personal knowledge of that. That's basic that's the rule. So when you get into the situation on cross-examination where you ask that question, what evidence did you rely on to prove that just because I'm in California, your laws apply to me? And he objects. Now you've got direct evidence of the prosecution knowingly putting a witness on a stand and countering your objection. Now, it doesn't mean that just because you catch him lying. So when the prosecutor said before, over my objection, that the witness was qualified and did have personal knowledge, he really didn't, did he? Given your objection. So this puts, any judge that was interested in fairness at all would not only toss out the witness's testimony along with the ticket, he would sanction the prosecutor for a serious Brady violation and lying, because he said over your objection he was qualified. So, there, you're not making tons of objections. You're objecting to one time, you're trying to get a clarification, then you have to move on, and then you use that to your advantage later.
Okay. And then do you recommend, since a plea was entered, without, my consent, would you recommend something like a motion to vacate plea leading up to the hearing?
Yeah.
Something along those lines? Well,
right, because the judge breached the legal procedure. You're not supposed to force a plea or tell them, because you're supposed to make a determination on the demur. Then you can request a plea.
All right.
Okay. That's the process. If you have a demur, that stays the time for a plea or a responsive answer. That's the way it works. How do I know? It's in the rules. And if you sue them, that's what they'll do. And there's no way on this green earth that any judge, especially in California, is going to expect that a fellow judge is going to have to wait to trial, or is going to have to put in an affirmative answer after they filed a motion to dismiss. It's ridiculous. And if anybody can show where a judge or a prosecutor was sued and they had to wait to trial to challenge jurisdiction, I love to see that citation. I'm not going to hold my breath, though. So do you have any other questions? Because, we got a little more time in segment.
Yeah. Well, at this point, I think I've gotten a lot of really good information. I just kind of wanted to throw out there, I live in the Valley and California, which is, in the general neighborhood of Sacramento. And yeah, it's been real tragic hearing about what's going on, what happened with Stephon Clark. And so I appreciate you mentioning something about that on the show, because, it's something that we deal with a lot out here. It's a conservative area out here. So people, a lot of justifications, they just throw out there, it's never the cop's fault. It's always got to be, they didn't follow the orders, they didn't do it quick enough, or something or other. And, really it's like, well, how has it ever become a justification just to kill someone? Like, how does that null their own life, Yeah,
and I question it. When you said Sacramento and conservative, that you're gonna have to take a second here and explain that to me, because that doesn't make any sense. Unless it's a very wealthy area, but even that doesn't make much sense. Conservative.
Well, the valley is like this, right? It's like there's a lot of poverty that's in our area, but at the same time, there's a definite land owning elite that runs things, and it's been that way around here for a long time. And I think that's something that people don't really look at a lot. You might look at some of the discourse that happens in the mainstream area, but that's never really enough to, in my opinion, to define something as liberal, conservative, progressive. When you really lift up the hood, like look what's really going on behind the curtain, you can still see that a lot of the same dominating forces are there.
Yeah, it's just not typically part of the narrative that Sacramento, of all places, would be predominantly conservative. But, that's usually here. It's all the left coast and all the libtards that it's look what the libtards have done to California. And like, it wasn't just liberal ideology that did that. It was Republican and Democrat. The idea, what has done it is the fact that it is accepted that basic principles of right and wrong do not apply to certain people. That's what has led directly to the problems in California, just like in Arizona and in Canada, Australia. That it's accepting this lie that it is okay to lie, steal, kill, and cheat other people for no other reason than you call yourself a government. That principles of right and wrong just don't apply if you call yourself a government. Well, I'm glad. Yeah, all right, we'll stay in touch with us. We'll get you into the chat after the show. And okay, so I appreciate the call, Richard in California. We have an all-California show today, so I want to welcome back Micah. Welcome back. Holy.
Hey, how you doing, Mark?
Are you outside on a freeway?
I had my earbuds in, but I took them out, so that ain't better.
Yeah, it sounded like a car was was driving by.
Oh yeah, well I'm pulled over on the side of the road so I don't lose service, but I rolled my window up now too.
Okay, what do you got for us, Steve?
Yeah, I was just calling to let you know how it went. I don't know if you remember, but I had the deal with the custody stuff, and I went in going in there. I decided to take the plea because it was 60 days in jail. 3 years probation and 16 weeks child endangerment classes, which is garbage. I don't have any child endangerment charges or violent charges at all. But I got them to plea it down to just 30 days on the ankle bracelet. And so considering the alternative was potentially 2.5 years in jail, I took the plea. And I felt like it was, the right call as far as damage control goes. So, anyways, that's how that went. Just wanted to call and update you. And then also I had a question about something that happened at the hearing. I was wondering what your thoughts might be.
Okay.
When I was in there, I went in thinking I was just going to automatically take the plea. And that's pretty much how it started. My public defender that they made me take said, we're going to enter a plea of no contest. Well, the judge started reading me off, my different, constitutional rights, the ones they feel like letting me know about, and asking if I was waiving them. And that kind of was a green light for me. It was a red flag, like, oh, I can, still play this out. Not that it's going to get anywhere, but so I went back into that mode of clarifications. I said, well, actually, I'm not, waiving anything. I'm only taking this plea under threat, duress, and coercion because I'm looking at 2.5 years jail, and I don't believe that I can get a fair trial. And he goes, well, if you are under threat and you don't think you can get a fair trial, then I can't take your plea. I was expecting that, but so that got me back into the line of question. I was like, well, I have the intent to enter a guilty plea today, and I'll waive those rights, but I need to clarify a few things that I've been trying to get clarified for the past year. And this was a new judge that I had not seen yet. And I've seen a lot of judges, so I wasn't expecting to see a new judge. And he let me talk for a minute, and I got right into the questions and was asking about the prosecutor submitting evidence. And this is what was different. Everybody else that I've dealt with has been super aggressive. He didn't beat around the bush and try to give me some garbage answer. He just plain sat there silent, looking like he had no idea how to respond or handle the situation. So
Typical.
I liked it because it made it easier for me to, come back at it, not having to, argue his stuff that if he was going to beat around the bush. It made it easier for me to just get into my next questions. But at the same time, I didn't get them clarified, obviously, since he didn't answer. But I asked all the main questions about jurisdiction, whether or not the laws apply to me, proof of that. And there was probably at least 5 to 10 times of awkward silence for them, not for me. Nobody saying a word. And I ended up asking if I asked them if I fired my public defender, that way I could try and get it back in my line of thinking was, I want to get this back in arraignment. And they're not answering my questions. So I said, if I fire my public defender, will the plea deal still be on the table today since I have the intent to enter a guilty plea? And he said, that's a question for the prosecutor. So here's my question to you. I looked at the prosecutor, asked the prosecutor, and of course the prosecutor said, we can't talk to him. He is an attorney. So I looked at my attorney. I said, counsel, please ask the prosecutor my question. And he said to me that the plea deal can change at any time. And so I said to him, I said, counsel, I'm not asking for your assumption. Please ask the prosecutor directly my question. And he refused to do it. So it was at that point I kind of just let it go since I had already, decided I was going to take the plea anyways.
All right. Wait, real quick. Hold it.
How could I have handled that situation better?
Yeah. Okay. All you had to do, what you could have said was to the public defender, please let the prosecutor know that he can speak directly to me. And then you could have asked the question and he would have been out of excuses. If your attorney allows the prosecution to speak to you, it's no problem. And if he was going to be a douche about it, you could say, "Excuse me, sir," to the judge. Could you just? It's okay if look. Could you just allow the prosecution to to speak? To answer the question directly. I just like to hear it because my own attorney's being a jerk about it.
Yeah. I mentioned that to the judge. I did say that. I said the reason I need to fire my public defender is because he has completely refused to represent me. In fact, he has misrepresented me the entire time I've met with him and dealt with him. But I didn't really. Like I said, it was 90% silence from everybody in the room except for me. So I was kind of just fishing. You know what I mean?
I understand, but now we know for the next time something like that happens, and I've mentioned on the show before, the prosecution cannot speak to you when you're represented by counsel unless your attorney allows him to. Other than that, and that's why when he pulls that crap, what up?
Yeah.
Oh.
I didn't know. I knew that I couldn't talk to him directly when I had an attorney. I did not know, however, that he could permit it.
Yes.
That's what I didn't know.
Yeah, oh man, you've got douchebags on both sides of the aisle here. Jeez.
Because that judge was so silent and seemingly timid compared to what I've been used to for the last year.
Yeah.
It was almost as if I smelled blood in the water, so I jumped all over it because I was getting frustrated that nobody was answering any of the questions, the clarifications, and they were looking really, really stupid. And,
sure.
And, just the fact their silence, made them look absolutely stupid. And I had quite a few people behind me still waiting to go. And next thing you know, I start hearing a few people behind me kind of laughing, and I'm getting more frustrated. By the time it was over with, I'm not necessarily recommending this to anybody else. I'm just saying this is what happened with me because I was kind of losing my patience. When I was finally threw in the towel because I had already planned on taking the plea anyways, he reread the questions about me waiving my rights and whatnot. And when it was all done, the following question was, "Are you under the influence of drugs or alcohol?" I said, "I wish I was." And then, is that a no? I said yes. No, I said no. And then at the end of it, like I said, I was frustrated.
Well,
and at the end of it, I started clapping, and I looked at the prosecutor. I said, "Congratulations, another conviction. I wonder how you do it."
Wow. Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that putting them on the spot and having them not be able to answer the questions, you think that led to them lowering it down to 30 days?
I don't know what I think, and I could be wrong because I'm not right about much, but what I think is when I met with the public defender that they made me have because they threatened me with jail if I didn't meet with him,
Right.
When I met with him the day before that hearing, which I believe was like a pretrial hearing because they entered that not guilty plea for me, I told him, I said, there's not a chance in hell I'm taking any plea and this is going to go to trial unless you can get them to agree to no jail time and drop the probation and no child endangerment classes, because that's all garbage. I said, I will do an ankle bracelet and for not more than the 60 days they want me to go to jail. And I said, and you need to ask them for halftime, but I don't know what he said because I wasn't there. But he called me about a half hour after, and he said they agreed to the plea. So I think they were just ready to be done with me. I don't know if it's because I was on to something. Now I am, but this whole year leading up, I was just, like I said, beating the dead horse with jurisdiction. So I think they were just tired of me and wanted to get me out of there.
Yeah, it could be.
I really don't know.
We don't have any direct evidence. We have some circumstantial. So, hey, we're completely out of time. I appreciate the update. I'm glad you did some good damage control. My name is Mark Stevens. Sorry we missed some people. We'll get you on Wednesday. We'll be streaming live, commercial free then. So check us out then. Again, my name is Mark Stevens, the No State Project for March 24th, 2018. Glad to be with you here. And so till next time, salud.